This crowd rises to its feet. Vaccaro slammed it home. Garland left wing, free ball. Perfect! Garland in the lane, locked the Mobley, pow! And Allen blocked the shot at the rim. Pow! With the left hand and a foul.
Welcome to the Chase Down Podcast, part of the Cavs Media family. I'm your host, Justin Rowan. The Chase Down is presented by Fubo, the official streaming partner of the Cavs. Watch over 350 channels of live sports and TV, including FanDuel Sports Network without cable. There's no cost and no commitment. Try for free at FuboTV.com/Cavs. The Indiana Pacers struck first against the Cavs, stealing home court in Game 1, and the Cavs might be a little worse for wear as a result of it. Joining me today to discuss this is my co-host, Carter Rodriguez. Carter, how you doing, buddy?
I think it's our pets' heads are falling off of the year. You know, pretty good to make it to May. Before we have one of those. Overall, though, Cavs land, less pleasant than it's been for the last couple weeks. But I did just have a nice anniversary trip with my wife to New York. So, there's pros and cons in this life.
Yeah, you win some, you lose some, and we got to win for ourselves here. Making his return to the podcast from 92.3 The Fan as well. Now doing pre- and post-game coverage for Rock Entertainment Sports Network, Anthony Lima. Tony, how you doing, buddy?
Guys, it's an honor. I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm scared. I'm not going to act like our pets' heads are falling off. Although, if you listen to some people, you would think that there might have been more Utah Jazz available after Rudy Gobert gave everybody the COVID a few years ago. I mean, what happened? What happened? The negativity, as if we still don't have, pretty good players and a pretty good superstar who I've seen score 50 on one leg before in the playoffs. So I'm not going to be deterred until maybe I see that injury report officially tomorrow.
Yeah, the injury report is a little scary. I think it's important to keep in mind that even if every questionable player does not play, and, that would be a serious blow. You'd be losing basically, the driving force of your offense in Darius Garland, the driving force of your defense in Evan Mobley. You would still be out there with an all-star guard and an all-star big man, and that is pretty much the roster construction of the Indiana Pacers. And you have a very good home court crowd. But before we get into what went wrong in Game 1 and kind of look ahead to this series, let the people know what you've been doing with Rock Entertainment Sports Network, or I guess, one game in to that experience.
Yeah, I didn't screw it up too bad in the opener, although some lady that showed up at the set, which is right there in the atrium over at Rocket Arena. When she found out who I was, she wasn't so sure. She still wanted me to sign the autographs along with AC and Boobie Gibson, because I can't devalue that. I can't do that. So I spared her. But no, it's been fun jumping on for coverage starting here in the second round. And we expect to have 2 months plus of coverage with pre and post, mostly an hour before, hour after, depending on some variance there. But we're excited. Kaylee Griffin, who everybody knows in Cavs Nation, she is going to be holding it down. She is a pro, along with AC, Boobie, and John Michael and Serena. John Michaels, everybody, the whole crew, and some of the cast of characters over at Channel 19 or locally in Cleveland, a part of it. So we are pumped. And I'm telling you, I signed up for 2 months. I did not sign up for a week and a half. Okay, oh, yeah. Let understand that, and I hope I'm getting paid for 2 months.
You're letting them know that's what this is about right now. As you mentioned, the coverage will start 1 hour before tip-off with these games. Game 2, it will be a half hour just because of the earlier kind of funky start time there. Excited to watch that on Rock Entertainment Sports Network. And I should mention it's also simulcast on my Cleveland 43 as well as FanDuel Sports Network, so you guys can be checking it out there. Before we dive into the game, one more piece of business. Kenny Atkinson, officially Coach of the Year.
Let's go.
He certainly earned it throughout the regular season, and he may have to earn it in Game 2, depending on availabilities. But I think the way that Kenny has managed this roster all season long, no matter who is available, finding ways to get the most out of the depth of this team has been one of the major stories of this season.
I can tell you guys that he deserved Coach of the Year because I do a sports talk radio show from 6 to 10 a.m. in Cleveland, and there was nothing to criticize basically the entire season, except for one Oklahoma City game. Sorry, I got Cavalier Kitty here trying to mess with the paper towels, which are holding up the camera. Very high-tech setup here. But The fact that we didn't really have a lot of anguish, a lot of sports talk topics, trying to critique things that the Cavs were doing, which, is my land. Like, we had to fill time with other things because we couldn't just sit there and pick on them. And it was incredible. Look, I think one of the advantages I said that I thought the Cavs had, and it's why I had the over at the start of the year on their win total, was familiarity, right? They didn't have the turnover that some of the rosters had. And I thought that if they could just stay healthy, they're going to win a lot of games. I did not see this win total. I did not see this level of dominance, the historical offensive numbers that were there almost through the entire season, the wire-to-wire #1 seed. And you've got to give a coach credit for that. Empowering players, which I love the way every time Kenny talks, I love trying to get on his level psychologically, because forget X's and O's. Yeah, he can do that. He's also got assistants for that. There are interns around the league that can draw up X's and O's. You got to have the players to do it, but he knew he had the players. He knew this was a great job to take, but also that term empowerment. And you could see the Cavs grow in confidence throughout the season. Yes, it's a regular season award. I'm fully aware they're down 1-0, and I'm fully aware that there might be some haters on social media that might be somehow pointing the blame at him in game one. I don't see eye to eye on that whatsoever. And I think he's going to make some interesting adjustments. I know we're going to talk about it, but he deserved the award. And by the way, no shade, JB Bickerstaff, he deserved second. I mean, I thought he was spectacular this year. And JB has got to do a lot of growing as a head coach. I think Kenny Atkinson has done a lot of growing. He would tell you that in his role as a head coach. So no shade on Bickerstaff. I thought he was great all year. Detroit was actually, if you don't mind getting in the muck and in the mud, I thought they were fun to watch, believe it or not. And in the end, I thought it was going to be a runaway. And I think, was it? Did you tabulate the results there? Was it pretty much a runaway?
It was a pretty comfortable win. JB got I think Kenny had 20 more first place votes.
Do we feel bad? Do we feel bad for Dag over there at Oklahoma City?
No.
It's almost like Jim Tressel and Urban Meyer couldn't win Big Ten Coach of the Year ever. And Oklahoma City was, they were so impressive. But, it just seemed like this was Kenny's award from the second half of the season on.
I just think, when we were talking about these awards, it just felt like the most, it was like the best science experiment you could have, because we all know this is the award we can judge the least well, right? Like, we're not in practice. We don't literally watch them coach. We don't know what decisions are theirs and what decisions are their staff's, unless they happen to tell us. And so, we never ever really get to know whether a player got better because he went in the gym and worked hard and got his body right, or because coach taught him a new way to think about his game. We just don't get to know as much. It's not as objective of a thing to observe. So, I kind of felt like Kenny's whole year was the most, in a science experiment, you always have a control group. Feels like the rest of the organization was the control group because everything was the same except Kenny. So it was very easy to ascribe a lot of this growth to the things that he brought to the table and a lot of the conversations he had with everyone. And, you couldn't be like, oh, well, with Detroit, you could be like, hey, yeah, they are a lot better. That's awesome. But they also brought in a bunch of adults in the room. They added a Tobias Harris and a Tim Hardaway Jr. and a bunch of guys who have been in the league for a while. They weren't just playing a fleet of 19-year-olds this year. You couldn't really say that about the Cavs. I have felt all year that just chalking it all up to Kenny is maybe not exactly what I would do, though I think he's had obviously an amazing year and I thought he should have been coach of the year. But at the end of the day, what we can evaluate that a coach does well, he did well. The rotations were good. He got good contributions from the depth. His stars got better. The offense hummed. The pace went way up. All the markers that you're looking for are there. And I think you made the right point in terms of him wanting this job. And I think I've said it a lot. Our listeners are probably sick of me saying it, but I, to this day, still think the best thing Kenny did with this roster was want to coach the roster that he signed up to coach. I am sure that guys went in and interviewed and talked about how they're going to move Evan to the 5 full time and how, they really want to lean in on Donovan as a lead creator, because there was a lot of, people whose opinions I respect, even though I didn't agree with it, that felt that way, that they needed to streamline their roster construction. And it seemed like from the jump, Kenny was like, no, I'll take this. What you got, good for me.
It's a great balancing act for us, people that critique or people like us that enjoy the game, and we're trying to figure out and synthesize all this different information with all these games and a new game to add to the calculus every single time, when you don't want to give too much credit to the coach, because in the end, it's going to be the players. Like in the NBA, we know, just ask Malone in Denver. In the end, the players are the ones that are probably going to be there. When we saw that with the Cavs. So, part of me is like, yeah, I think Evan would have been pretty good with a lot of different coaches in the league, but there's no doubt you could see a stark difference in the confidence, in the ball handling, in him understanding the angles and driving at the point of attack. We already know he had the defensive thing down. I mean, we saw that quite literally his rookie year. I mean, I could even make an argument that I thought Evan might have played better defense, a year ago or 2 years ago than he did this year, and he wins Defensive Player of the Year. But it is a testament to Kenny that, these guys are now paid. You got guys that have real money or are in line for some big time money, but where are the egos? And there are teams, whether you have young guys or old guys, that balancing the egos is an impossible pursuit around this league over time. And, I credit Kobe Altman too. I mean, GM of the year, sure, why not? For keeping the exact same team sounds crazy, especially some of the names I was rattling off at the end of last year that I was trying to think about. Should we break up the nucleus? Does this team have a limited ceiling? And of course, we'll revisit all of that depending on how things go in the playoffs. But look, again, this Cavs team ruined my season as a sports talk shock jock radio host, because where was the criticism? What people said, I've sold out. I've been too much of a homer this season. I've even said nice things about Max Strus. How does that happen? That's how good Kenny is.
As a loyal listener every single day, I still found those little bits of information, those little takes that you didn't have enough nuance on. And I've let you know, and I've let Ken know every single damn time, because I am looking for things to be upset about. And you know what? That really makes this fertile ground for me when the Cavs lose a playoff game, because there is no shortage of that. I think one of the great things that Kenny has done this season is get the team to look like they're all on the same page on both ends of the court. I think it's been a consistent theme throughout this season. It just did not appear to be the case to start game one. I thought, honestly, the point of attack defense was probably the most jarring thing for me. Whether it's Donovan Mitchell, Ty Jerome, Sam Merrill, Max Strus, I honestly thought had, in the first half, probably had one of his worst defensive games.
Brain fart city, baby.
All of them were really, really struggling on that end when it came to containing the point of attack. And I think once you lose integrity at that front line, it's going to get you into rotations. It's going to get you scrambling, and you're going to give up quality looks. And the thing that came to my mind was, is this kind of like when we would play Toronto in the Eastern Conference Finals and it would affect game one against Golden State? It reminds me of, the two games, most recent games we played against Boston. We were coming off 40-point wins. And I just feel like anytime you are in one of those situations, it hurts your ability to be sharp in that next game. So I guess the real question is this the Miami Heat's first win of the postseason?
I love it because I've been ripping on Heat cultures. I know you guys have done yeoman's work doing just that, because they deserve it. And the Cavs might have ended it once and for all. You're right. Maybe this was from the grave. Pat Riley, have we checked in on him? Is the Godfather doing okay? Yeah, maybe Tyler Hero is still talking somewhere about counting this on his playoff registry. Look, it was jarring. It was one thing I was legitimately worried about. I did tell everybody, I was nervous about a quarter and a half of this game going in, not because I didn't think we had the personnel advantage, not because I didn't think that we were going to be successful in the series. It was simply because it was jarring. It's like going from, algebra to all of a sudden you're in trigonometry honors. It's a big step, right? It's a huge step. And in this case, what did we learn from the Cavs' domination of the Miami Heat, other than we're good, we know we're good, we care, they might have have a foot out the door. And I think we would have beat them if they had Jimmy Butler. Like, that's how good the Cavs were. But what lessons did we really learn? And sometimes, and I thought this happened through some of the win streaks for the Cavs, you can develop bad habits by winning. And I know that sounds silly, right? But if you're Kenny Atkinson, how are you going to get your guys' attention? It's one thing to talk about, hey, take this as a legitimate threat. Look at this Pacer tape. Understand what they are doing. They are better than maybe anybody in the NBA, getting you involved in the cross-match circus and getting you scrambling and getting you out of disciplined closeouts. And if you come out on the wrong foot, they will take advantage. They understand how to drive baseline and still with a head on a swivel to make sure they can still find angles and shooters in the right compartments on the floor. It's one thing to teach that for those off days. It's another thing when you actually see it. And so, yeah, I was disappointed like every Cavs fan that it seemed like they were not ready in that first quarter. And unfortunately, you know, when you start losing guys one by one, some of that cohesiveness, you know, everybody trying to have their hands on the rope, but all of a sudden the guy next to you is gone and somebody new is in, and the rotations have totally been shaken. And you're playing a team that, you saw it, that was a confident team coming on the road, a team that, say what you want about who they played to get to the Eastern Conference Finals last year, in their mind, they're an Eastern Conference Finals team. And they came into the series believing that. And they've got a good coach too. They've got a championship head coach. You know, and Kenny sat on some championship benches, but they've got a championship head coach. So they were not going to be intimidated. They weren't. With all that said, I'm sitting there in the third quarter saying this game's over. I got a little cocky, and the Cavaliers got every loose ball in that third quarter. They got, you know, positive contributions for defensively. I mean, Isaac Okoro, Max Strus, bat out of hell, coming in and saving possessions. Evan Mobley, your Cavs working really hard to win the 50-50 loose ball luck. Wasn't luck yesterday in that third quarter. They did everything to turn that building around to where it was essentially on fire. One of the loudest crowds Greg Anthony said he had ever seen. And then what did Indiana do? They closed the quarter. We kind of maybe botched a 2-for-1. Donovan fouls Siakam, and instead of your 2-for-1, they end up +1 on those final possessions. And I was like, man, I'm going to file that away, because that showed me that Indiana could take a counterpunch and they could deliver yet another one. And they were feeling good about themselves going in to the huddle in the fourth quarter. And I don't think there's a lot of teams in the NBA that could have combated that Cavalanche where the Cavs were swarming to that extent.
Yeah, it does feel like I do want to ask about the readiness side of things, because, like, you know, I don't think I think there's some people that could, you know, make the argument or make the case like, oh, they didn't respect, you know, they got high in their own supply, you know, they didn't respect this Pacers team. I almost kind of lean the other way, where I think they were almost a little deferential stylistically, where they kind of hung back and let Indy kind of dictate the terms a little bit, you know? Like, I don't know if, like, I think it was in that third quarter spurt when a Strus hit either Allen or Mobley on the alley-oop, like that empty side pick and roll after the ball swung around. I'm like, where was that possession the whole game? You know, they were just spending so much time setting these screens on Nembhard on the other side of the floor, not really getting an advantage, not really pressing, really just kind of like hanging, you know, kind of like patiently letting him reconnect to the ball handler. And like I just kind of felt that way on both sides of the floor. Like, they just kind of were overly deferential to the style. You know, the coolest thing about that Miami series, the thing I thought I learned about that Miami series, was that the Cavs have learned that you need to hit first. Like, and that's not like in the game like winning first. It's literally hitting them before they hit you. And I felt like Indiana really controlled the game physically because they were playing so assertive, because they were playing their style. And when I say physically, I don't mean the hard fouls. I mean the pushing, the grabbing, the bumping. Like, I just feel like they hit first over and over and over again. And I just left that game begging the Cavs, play your game. Your game, when you play your game, you are better than them when they play their game. And like, that's like the best compliment I can give to a Rick Carlisle team, is they're really, really hard to drag out of their style.
Well, what's funny is their defensive profile, and I know you can break them down from January on, and sometimes I get caught in that silliness with shooting splits. Look, when Halliburton's healthy, they're a different team, but even though they've got guys that seem like they would hold up perimeter defenders, they've never been a great team defensive unit the way that the Cavs. They don't have that ceiling, but now 82 games and, playing a different team every night, that's done. The playoffs we know are a different setup. And boy, Carter, I didn't think about it that way. Deferential, I like to see a little bit more meanness. And I know, again, that's like easy from somebody on the outside, like the niceties. And even Kenny, after, talking today, he didn't even want to throw any kind of big criticism or bulletin board material about, them and the way that they play. He was even nice.
He was respectful. That's probably the angriest I've seen him all season, but he kept it, in the lines, very much so.
Right. I would like to see a little bit more nastiness, and it doesn't have to be Draymond Green. I think fans get caught up in that. It certainly doesn't have to be that way, but you got to
play playoff ball. You have to play playoff basketball. And like one of the coolest things to me about the start of that Miami series, I was sitting right next to my co-host right over there, and they started in full court press against the Heat. Like that, they did not play a possession of full court press all regular season. And Kenny, that's a tone-setting playoff decision of like, hey, we're gonna bump you from the first touch of the game. When you think it's gonna be easy, guess what? It's not gonna be easy. And like, I just don't think they brought that because they were so concerned about getting back into their shell against the transition of the Heat. And you could literally watch them thinking. I mentioned it was brain fart city. Like, there were a lot of possessions where I didn't even feel like Indy was pressing that hard. Like, by the way, everyone talked about how Indy dragged the Cavs to their pace. They played 99 possessions in this game. It was not that fast
of a
game.
game for both teams.
It was not. It was fast for playoffs.
You wouldn't know it from the score. You wouldn't know it from the score.
Fast for playoffs, but not fast for regular season. These guys shouldn't be like crazy gassed from this pace. But like, even when Indy was going at like 70% in some semi-transition, you saw the Cavs being like, can't mess up in transition defense. And it's like, just be disciplined. Just play the discipline that you're used to playing. Like, I just felt like you watched them overthink and then short circuit on so many of those defensive possessions. And I just feel like they got away from themselves in a way that is like pretty unusual.
Yeah, and I think they let Nemhard. Yeah, he's not. Listen, the Dora, the Cavalier Kitty's not happy either. Showing a little bit of feistiness. There is a way in the NBA to find that line. You don't have to be dirty. I don't think we as fans, I don't think we mind a little dirty once in a while, just to let everybody know, like, you're not just going to come in here and mess with us. And we can talk. I mean, it's a whole nother conversation about whether we thought those fouls, which were certainly fouls that were not called and inexplicably challenged. And still, I feel like the NBA needs to do a better job of explaining what happened there.
To be clear, I think we can go over that. I don't think that they were dirty plays. I think that they were trying to make the Cavs earn it at the line. I think they were hard playoff fouls. And the fact that they weren't called was really surprising. And the fact that, a lot of those ended up leading to 3-pointers on the other end, in 5-on-4 situations, that's a backbreaker in a game that was kind of decided by a couple possessions. But I didn't think that they were dirty plays. Like for me, I've talked to Carter about this. I'm not really proud of it, but I'm a little proud of it. I was a dirty player in high school. I recognize a dirty play when I see one. I don't think that's what it was.
No one's surprised, brother.
I went through absolutely all the emotions. I wanted my pound of flesh after this game. I don't like seeing my guys on the injury report, but you can't even retaliate with a hard playoff foul of your own if you're not running these guys off the 3-point line. I mean, if they're just floating around on the outside, you need to get that guy driving to the basket if you're going to put a little lumber in them.
Game recognized game, Justin. I didn't know you like that, but it's a true ball knower that you are. I respect it, and I think any edge that you need to gain. But so it gets interesting, right? Because I'm hearing the Cavs talk after the game, and there's no doubt there's two things that Kenny Atkinson talked, because all the players echoed the sentiments in the post-game press conference. The few that did talk, which was pace. I did hear that a lot, and I also heard toughness and physicality. I mean, I heard it to a man, every single one. I mean, Ty Jerome was out there talking about how fast Indiana was. Again, one thing to see it on tape. It's another thing to see a team that knows their identity and knows that's their only chance, right? Indiana, whether or not they think they're as talented as you, we know they're not. Well, I don't think you'd find anybody even in Indiana that was being fair that would argue otherwise, but they know who they are. They've made a playoff run where they were that, and now you add Mathurin, who was injured last year, into that, and now you've got a guy Nembhard who's become Mr. Playoff 3-point shooter who can't do it in the regular season. So there are some things that confidence gets you. I'm just telling you, I watched 75 feet, like Max Strus got body checked, just trying to get back on defense. Little things, right? It's little things, and they're not going to call that a foul. And I don't even think Max Strus would be arguing for a foul there. I think it's just that they were going to make sure that you felt them throughout. And so my question is, in game 2, depending on who's even going to be out there, because you don't want to get caught up in that too much. But are you going to see some token physicality 3 minutes in to try to set the tone where, hey, if they call us for a foul, they call us for a foul. No big deal. Even Evan is the interesting one, because I didn't think there was a soul out there that could neutralize Evan. I just didn't think they had. And there are a couple times Evan got an offensive rebound, one against Miles Turner, where I'm like, Miles is in good position and he can't get his hand up because Evan has added that dimension and skill and knows how to seal a guy off using his bigger shoulders that seem like they're 10, 15 pounds bigger, and a mass is there that wasn't there even maybe a year and a half ago. So, Evan is a guy too. Can he set the tone? I mean, we're in year 4 here. It's, there are some guys that do have some playoff experience on Indiana, but they're all, Halliburton doesn't have a ton of playoff experience. Like, I think that you're right, Carter. I go back to that deferential thing. There's no time for that now. No room for that. The Cavaliers get back to that swagger, and I know it's not as easy when you don't have Darius out there who's part of that swagger. But I think a difference we'll see very early on if that is something that they're going to come out and set the tone with.
Yeah, they got to play their style. You have to know what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and play within it, right? Like when you know your strengths and weaknesses, you can identify when a little bit of help is needed, which is what Zoom AI Companion does for us, because only you can do your best work. Zoom AI Companion can help you do the rest, like automatically taking notes, answering meeting questions, and helping you respond to your coworker. Available at no additional cost with eligible paid plans. Work happy. Zoom AI Companion. The funny thing about the physicality was, I think we really felt it on the perimeter, right? Like Indy was staying
which is how
home.
Indy does things.
Yeah, they were staying home to, a crazy extent. They were forcing the Cavs. Not only were the Cavs being differential on the defensive side and kind of allowing Indy to have that freedom of movement. On the offensive end, Cleveland, they were giving them a red carpet to the paint. Like typically when you talk about physicality, the types of things you look at are second chance points, offensive rebounds, points in the paint. The Cavs had a 70-38 edge in points in the paint, 21-4 edge on second chance points, and a 13-7 edge on the offensive glass. Like typically those are those identifiers. But what Indy was really doing was saying, yeah, like you can attack the basket, but we're going to stay home. We're going to make you feel uncomfortable from 3. And this is a game, honestly, I reject the notion that this was a 3-point variance game. That's part of the equation. Don't get me wrong. Indy shot incredibly well. But when you look at the wide open threes, Indy was 13 of 25 on wide open 3-point attempts. The Cavs were 3 of 11. When you're talking about they got over twice as many wide open looks, I'm someone that cares about process over results. A little bit of variance here and there. Yeah, the score was close. But the reason the score was close had to do with us winning the possession battle more than anything else. Like that. And if we're shorthanded, they're going to have to do that again. Like we're going to need to kill them on the glass. We're going to have to kill them on the interior. But when I'm looking at those type of 3-point numbers, we didn't get the type of looks that make me say, hey, we should have had a good quality shooting game. Because for the season, the Cavs averaged 25 wide open looks from 3 against Indiana. In game 1, only 11.
I've got a real zag for you, fellas, about the health of the Cavs offense. I think it's kind of bad they only had 7 turnovers against that level of ball pressure. Like, that tells me that the passing and the movement was not where it needs to be. You know, Caitlin Cooper, who covers the Pacers, who does an amazing job, and I'm paraphrasing because I didn't have the stat pulled up, said that, like, per 100 possessions, the Cavs averaged, like, 230 passes in this game. 30th place was 270 average in the league, you know? And I think, in general, there was just so much. I thought they worked so hard, ate up so much shot clock, chasing Halliburton on switches. And Halliburton, in this game at least, was not Tyler Hero. Like, he held up way better on switches, and I think a lot of it is all the work that someone like Andrew Nembhard was doing before the switch, where, you know, it's so different attacking Tyler Hero with 18 seconds left on the shot clock than it is attacking Tyrese Halliburton with 8, with a perfectly set shell defense behind him. You know, and I just felt like they were, you know, I don't think this Cavs team is at its best mismatch hunting. And that is part of the playoffs. I understand that. But
we
like,
don't want to be the Boston Celtics. Come on. We want to play ethical playoff basketball.
You're damn right we do, Tony. And like, I think, I just think they got away from, you know, and Kenny mentioned that their offense let them down. So I think he understands that. But like, that's why I called out that Strus, you know, ball flow, side pick and roll alley-oop, because I'm like, you know, it's like, oh, there you are, guys. Like, that's what you are. Like, I think it is such a negative indicator for this team on a night where you're not generating consistently clean looks that Ty and Donovan combined for 50 field goal attempts. That Ty Jerome, on a night where he does not have it, he had a really, you know, I would say one of his choppier high volume nights he's had in terms of just getting stonewalled on some possessions. Mm-hmm. Him having as many shot attempts as Mobley and Allen combined when the Cavs worked hard to get those guys the ball just on a normal pick and roll, you know, not even pick and rolls where they were getting huge advantages, but because Indy's interior defense isn't that strong and because they weren't sending help, they got clean looks every single time. Just felt like the priorities were a little out of whack in this game.
The antidote to a lot of what you said plagued them in that opening game, unfortunately, was in street clothes. You know, I just think Darius Garland changes so much of that. The assist totals, I mean, right there, the way that you have to defend, especially this year, Darius, and what that opens up. And, you know, we talk about targeting guys, whether it's, you know, mismatches or on the other end, like getting guys and big men out of sort, getting them tilted and getting the whole, you know, the whole side of the basketball floor in your favor with numbers. I mean, Darius does all of that. He's been clinical. He's been a technician at doing that stuff this year. And you know, not having him, you know, the reality is, no matter how many silly conversations some people wanted to get going about Ty Jerome versus Darius Garland, when they're not competing with each other, they're quite literally the perfect one to the other tandem in the league. When there was almost zero drop off when either Donovan or Darius would go to the bench, and, you know, Ty Jerome was leading that unit. You see just how different they play. It doesn't mean bad. It doesn't mean Ty Jerome, what he does is bad. It's ridiculous. He's been sensational all year. It's just different. And, you know, I hope we don't have to see a lot of different just for the sake of having to deal with, you know, this injury to Darius, because the fact is you're just a different team when you go from having a guy who played at an all NBA level for most of the season to not on the floor. Like, that's, I don't care what you say, that is a huge difference. You know, you can ask, you know, the Golden State Warriors, when guys start dropping like flies, next thing you know, Kawhi Leonard has, you know, a ring in Toronto. So, and Pascal Siakam certainly knows all about that. So yeah, that's all I'm saying. Like, you know, there's going to be a big discussion online. And sometimes I think, you know, Justin and Carter, you guys are just eternally online, so you're going to allow these Pacer fans to get to you. Don't let you know, Pat McAfee and Caitlin Clark get to you, or Papa Halliburton.
Don't worry. I've already picked a beef with some indie beat writer that I've never heard of before today, but he is now enemy number one. You're right. I think obviously Garland would help a lot. I think it's something we've seen over the last 3 years, right? In Mitchell's first year with Darius, when Garland was on the court, they had a top 5 offense. When he was off the court, they had the 29th. Last year, when Darius was not himself, the Cavs were not able to have a top 10 offense. This year, the Cavs have a historic offense with Darius on the court, best offense in NBA history when he's on the court, and 13th when he's off. So, that floor has raised. But when you talk about a team as good offensively as Indiana, hey, if Darius isn't in the game, you're going to need to get it done a little bit more on the defensive end. And I think what Ty did in game 1 isn't too dissimilar to some of what he did against Miami. Like, the shot quality has been tough for Ty all season long. That's a guy that takes and makes a lot of tough shots. They just needed something a little bit different. And, Donovan and Ty combined for 50 field goal attempts. They only generated 14 potential assists. And they got 12 assists on those 14. So it's not like they were creating assist opportunities for other guys and, hey, they're missing their shot, so I'm just going to do it myself. They almost shot 100% off of those guys passing. But when you have a ratio of, 50 field goal attempts to 14 assist opportunities created between the two guards, yeah, you're going to feel like, hey, despite the fact that we're getting into the paint at will, kind of felt like we got away from Evan Mobley as the game progressed. It kind of felt like we weren't capitalizing on Jarrett Allen rolling to the basket. And I think that's one of the things that Darius does. We all know that Donovan's the best player on this team. He's someone that can go to a place from a scoring perspective that nobody else can. But Darius is kind of still the primary driver of the offense overall. And he does such a good job of understanding who needs the ball and keeping the Cavs within their identity offensively.
Whenever Steve Jones of the Dunker Spot talks about this Cavs team, the nicest thing he says every time he posts a clip of the Cavs getting other teams in the blender, he always says, the Cavs just keep making you guard. Like, here's the first action that you snuffed out. Here's the second action. Here's the third action. Here's the fourth action. And you finally, the dam breaks and the Cavs got a wide open look. Or in a season like this, someone hit a crazy shot. And all that effort was for nothing. And you need both of those pieces of the puzzle in order to, be a championship team. Like, you're not always, no team, the greatest teams in NBA history have to hit hard shots to score, but like, you can't build the whole plane out of that material. And I did not know about that 14 potential assist stat. I think that's a killer.
It's a rhythm game, especially early in a series. So I always draw a stark contrast when I talk to people about why the NBA playoffs are different. The first game of the series, when we had LeBron and had the luxury of having LeBron feel his way out, process over the span of 4 to 7 games, how to combat every single thing, and he would take it all into consideration over the course of the first 48 minutes or so, and sometimes in the game too. And then you would see it like, oh, I got this. And now all of my teammates are going to be beneficiaries of how it's built on itself, everything that I've been processing. Okay, but when you get to game 7, as you've seen the game 7 so far, you almost have to throw X's and O's out the window. It's like, who's got legs left? Who can elevate over a defender? Who can get by a defender? And who can just put the ball in the basket by that time? We've seen everything. They've seen everything. Like, we just got to go get baskets because there aren't going to be a lot of them. And this is different. This was the first game. I like to see guys in rhythm. And I know the stat was circulating about Donovan Mitchell in game 1's, the 30 points. Obviously, we know he's capable of hitting every single 3 he took in that game, with maybe the exception of the one that was blocked, right? And they blocked a few on the perimeter with some of that length or guys chasing it, sometimes got a little lucky, or the Cavs maybe needed one more pass. So we know Donovan can make all those. He can step into those at any time. What's so gifted about his footwork is that he can actually jump into a 3-point shot off the dribble left foot. He can do it right foot. I mean, that's Carmelo Anthony stuff. That's Kobe Bryant stuff. There's not a ton of guys that are skilled at him as doing it. So I'm never crushing him on the shot selection, because if he takes 11 threes, I'm guessing he's going to hit more than one. The rest of his career, I don't think he ever has a game like that. But the issue is when he's shooting those and just stepping into them with 18 on the shot clock or 15 on the shot clock, then you're not really making Indiana have to buckle, think twice, tilt their defense, start to get them scrambling in the way that they forced you to get scrambling. And I would say the same thing about Ty. It's not that I thought Ty was taking any more difficult shots. In fact, I think they got it in their heads like, oh my God, these guys cannot stop us from getting to the hoop.
Yeah.
But what you're also doing, if you have two players with the lion's share of those forays to the basket, and obviously Ty didn't shoot a ton of threes, but then you've got Donovan, settling for a lot of those threes, then other guys are just not going to be in rhythm. Even when you don't shoot, it's touching that basketball. It's being able to pound that ball a couple times, throw to the opposite corner, and now you've got everybody circulating on defense and not knowing where that shot is coming, and then fatiguing, just quite honestly, just wearing them out. And instead, Donovan Mitchell, I don't think people realize, he played 34 minutes. And I went back and looked, and I'm like, wow, that's interesting. I thought in a close game he's going to play more minutes. And in a non-blowout situation, you have to go back to his rookie year to find a playoff game where he played 34 minutes or less. And yet I watched him and I saw his body language, and I'm like, man, this guy is worn out, because it is exhausting having to get out there in the perimeter, make your first point of attack move, get by one guy. And now, I've got a Euro step. I've got a plant off my right foot and toggle and jump to the left side. And now I got to think about my finishing package, even though they don't have a ton of shot blocking. And yeah, he would finish. That's exhausting, guys.
Yeah.
And he did that from especially that third quarter. He was on it, and he was taking the ball from 3/4 court all the way in doing that. That is going to wear you down. So box score said 34 minutes. Felt like a 41-minute game against the Orlando Magic.
And
that is what it felt like.
And not only that, our buddy Spencer Davies just tweeted out a video where he's talking about, the Cavs injury situation. And we know that Donovan was dealing with the ankle coming into the playoffs. That is still apparently something that's bothering him. He's apparently also dealing with some calf soreness as well. If we're playing the injury game, if we're looking ahead to game 2 here, because my mentality really is, the Cavs have found ways to win games shorthanded all season long. We've seen them be competitive, insanely shorthanded against the Indiana Pacers even, right? So if they can find a way to go out and win game 2, if they are in fact shorthanded, then you have multiple days off until, Friday. Then you just have to, kind of compartmentalize in your mind, get a split in Indiana. You have home court back. Hopefully we get healthier as this series progresses. If we're going into game 2, and Kenny said that Mobley and Hunter are both doubtful in his eyes, so we'll see what happens there. Obviously, DeAndre Hunter with the dislocated thumb on his shooting hand, Evan Mobley dealing with an ankle injury. If Garland, Mobley, and Hunter are all out, I honestly think you have to trust the depth that you have. You have to trust the guys that have stepped up this season and start Ty Jerome alongside Donovan just to get that supplemental playmaking next to him.
I'm surprised by this.
To lessen the burden a little bit more. And then you trust a Craig Porter Jr. to come into the game. I think you need to have multiple ball handlers out there. I think you need to find ways to make Donovan's life a little bit easier rather than asking him to be that primary initiator when
who are your 5 starters? Who are your 5 starters?
I think I would start Jerome, Mitchell, Strus, Wade, and Allen.
That sounds right to me. I like that take. I don't think that'll happen. I think Sam will continue starting, which I thought Sam had a really rough defensive game in game 1.
Honestly, that game was the difference between Miami, who was floating on the perimeter, and Sam doing a really good job navigating screens, staying, in front of his man, and guarding guys that actually have juice off the dribble.
And all those guys have juice. Neesmith, Nembhard.
Like from a point of attack standpoint, that's where Sam and honestly even Ty struggled to.
Yeah, they grade out the worst there by the metrics.
Yeah, Ty's going to, he's going to poke away. He's going to get steals, but he and Sam are probably the weakest point of attack defenders. Honestly, that's a strength of Darius's. He's going to get targeted because we switch so much and there's length, but he does a good job staying in front of his man. But with the toe situation, which Brian Windhorst described as turf toe on today's podcast, I don't know if that's going to be the case, right? Like, I don't know if he's at 70%, if he's even going to be his normal self at the point of attack. But
yeah. So going with, if it is Ty, I think the thing about starting Dean, and I think you kind of have to start Dean because I think Pascal is like, for being a generally normal sized power forward, the best post scorer in the league. Like, I get why, Jokic is, he's just got such an outrageous size advantage, but just like in terms of the post bag, I think Siakam can go up against anyone. I think it just makes the most sense. However, if Evan doesn't play, you're gonna have to play a lot of minutes small. I don't think they want to dust Tristan off in this series, though. It might have to. It might be an okay Tristan series just because Indy is not good on the boards on either side of the ball. And a little extra physicality and screen setting can go a long way because I don't think there were a lot of great screen set in game one. But I do like your idea here, Justin. I actually think it is the right call just to say, hey, let's play Cavaliers basketball. And Cavaliers basketball means 2, 3, 4 guys who can initiate offense on any given play. And I think there is the other thing that is not maybe being accounted if you just roll Sam and Dean out is you're not just losing the playmaking at the point guard position with no Darius, you're losing Evan ability to run an inverted pick and roll,
that's my
to initiate in the front court, and you just kind of need to find it because Dean is just that's not going to be who Dean is.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting, guys. And obviously, let's get wild, right? Let's get crazy. If that is the case, that's worst case scenario. I think you're going to see a lot more zone. I know it's tough to really extrapolate anything from the regular season matchups against Indy, but I think they ran like 66 zone possessions, and it was like 0.8 points per possession, which would be like dead last offense in the NBA.
Indy struggles versus zone. That was something listening to Pacers previews. That is something that they struggled with.
And look, I thought, the zone, if you notice, it looked to me to the naked eye. And I asked Boobie Gibson, who was sitting next to me while we were watching, I'm like, did they just go from just standard 2-3 to matchup? And he's like, man, I can't tell. And I'm like, I couldn't tell either. The way that listen, I'm classically trained in the 2-3 matchup zone from my years at Syracuse. So I'm always looking for certain indicators, on the wing. And, you could play, Boeheim had like 8 different ways to play their matchup zone depending on the day. So he was always really hard to scout. You wouldn't think the zone is. But I do think it's a tool. Is it an additive? Might be just by necessity in this series. And look, what do you give up in a zone? You give up or some rebounding, but the way the Cavs can chase basketballs, and they just seem to always have an eye for it, and I thought they did in the last game. Maybe it's worth using a little more than you'd like to typically, and just try to mess with Halliburton, because there's no doubt he got into that rhythm. The possessions against Jared Allen, I've seen people suggest that, it's just not a Jared Allen series. Well, guess what?
It is
the
now.
Luxury right now. Yeah, it's an everybody series who's available. I mean, you just got to play guys. And still, Jared Allen still had Halliburton out 28 feet from the basket, taking some shots that are not easy on the road in a playoff game.
Yeah, you have to live with those, right? And if they kill you with the shot making, I think you do it. But I think we got, as Carter said, we got away from our identity. We were over helping a whole lot. We were scrambling defensively. And I think this is just going to have to be a series where you stay home a little bit more. We have a lot of guys that are very good at screen navigation. Zach Lowe mentioned, the Cavs faced 36 ball screens, and, the rate at which they switched those ball screens was the 3rd highest of any team this season. I think you have to trust the guys a little bit more, particularly I was sitting in that game and I was like, I don't know if this is a series for Sam Merrill. I don't know if this is a series for Isaac Okoro. I thought Okoro's first shift started off really poorly. Then I thought he was actually very good on Halliburton. Then I thought his second half was very difficult. I was like, you know what? This is probably just not an Okoro series. Guess what? Now it's going to have to be. If these guys are out of the lineup, Sam's going to need to play. Okoro's going to need to play. You're probably going to need to play Craig Porter Jr. And who knows? Javonte Green.
I think there might be some Javonte
play.
Minutes in this
and
game.
You might even want to dust off a Jalen Tyson, someone who's going to buy you some extra possessions, place with some physicality, and has a 30 ball against Indiana. You know, maybe he's got a little bit of confidence here.
He's not scared.
He shot great in garbage time against Miami.
Miami was great. Garbage time, pregame, postgame, at Live after the Club 11. I mean, I think it was all time to score. Listen, it's all on the table, and these are tough. These are tough because you start going through these scenarios. But the one thing I know is the shooting variance thing. You started out, Justin, saying that you're a little agitated. If people are just going to chalk a game up to shooting variance, then what are we even doing here? Why even try to break down the game? There's a cause and effect of all of these things. I do think the guys that are going to play for the Cavs, they're going to be in some desperation, and I think it's going to be a little harder for Indiana this time around. And when a team makes it at the rate that they just made it, sometimes they can be a little shell shocked when some of those are in and out or don't fall, and that starts to break up the rhythm.
Yeah, we watched this happen. We watched this happen to the Cavs in Game 2 against the Heat. They go nuts in that second quarter, and they stop going nuts, and they're like, "How do we play basketball again?" It does just break your brain a little bit when you're that hot. Like, I will say though, this is an Indy team that can shoot. And I don't want to hear anyone cite that Andrew Nembhard is a 29% 3-point shooter to me. Because I tweeted this out. He shot 60, 55, 54, and 49% from 3 in the 4 playoff series he has played so far. And I'm going to quote Steve Jones again and say that you'll live with it until you can't live with it. And these are not
the thing that drove me
nuts. This is not an 82 game sample. You have you're gonna have to run these guys off the line. You're going to need to have discipline. If you are gonna switch everything, well, you also can't be in constant rotation. The switch is designed to not give that stuff up. So that is the thing that makes me the most encouraged coming out of that game 1 is all the stuff from you're just not playing well, and the injuries are very, very scary. Because now you're just going to depend on guys to, your ceiling's a lot lower without an Evan, without a DeAndre, without a Darius. But we know this team's floor can be very, very high, even when they're playing the 8th, 9th, and 10th guys in their rotation.
It used to drive me nuts when Daryl Morey would sit there and he'd say, well, it's a shooting variance, small samples. Sorry, a playoff series is a small sample, right? And I think Carter and I will point out at times when we think, hey, this is a shooting variance game. That first loss against Atlanta where the Cavs, I think, had 34 wide open threes and couldn't hit any of them. Atlanta had way fewer and they hit all of theirs. That I'll point to. But when you're talking about 11 wide open threes versus 25, there was something wrong with your process. If you brought that to the middle where it's 17 and 17 and hey, they just shot a little bit better on theirs, that's a different story. But you're right, Carter, about Nembhard. I think, we're so familiar with the context of our own team. We missed the fact that Andrew Nembhard missed a bunch of time this season, and it took him a little time to find his rhythm. Previous years, he's been a 35, 36% 3-point shooter. He's not a 29% shooter. You're going to have to respect this guy here, and you're going to have to respect all of these shooters. You're going to have to make them feel uncomfortable because once teams find a rhythm, if you're giving them rhythm jumpers and you're not playing defense before the shot in the first half, they're going to be in a groove, and it's going to be a whole lot harder to turn that faucet off when you start contesting those shots in the second half.
And by the way, guys, speaking to the whole variance thing it's it when you see it. I've seen enough James Harden Game 7 in big playoff moments to know when a sampling is now significant and is now no longer a noisy sample. So I'm with you there.
Yeah, but it's going to be interesting to see who the Cavs have available, who Kenny goes to. He's already earned that Coach of the Year. He might have to earn it a second time over. Lima, before we get you out of here, is there anything that we haven't touched on that you want to mention before we wrap this thing up?
That Max Strus can play on my dodgeball team anytime. What a save. What a save. The crowd, I'll tell you, the crowd, and everybody knows what I've said about Max Strus that was around me watching the game. The amount of, see that? Did you see that? Did you see that? And he didn't even shoot well, but it was like, this is the effort you need. And I did say on our post-game show afterwards, I'm like, man, if they had 11 Max Struses in terms of effort from the moment the game started, probably wouldn't have been, a close game down to the wire. I think the Cavs would have been okay.
Yeah, Max, we talked about it before. I think the effort is almost always there. I think he's someone that holds himself and everyone else accountable. So we're going to need a big Max game. If those guys are out, we're going to need a lot from Max. We're going to need maybe a shooting variance game of our own to tie this up to 1-1. And you do that, it's a new series. Hey, I picked the Cavs to win in 5. I believe they can win 4 out of 5 games. I don't think it's over if they go down 0-2. You just don't want to be in a situation where you have to win, multiple games like that in Indiana. You want to make life a little easier for yourselves. You want to take that pressure off. And you don't want to be susceptible to, a potential shooting variance game if you outplay them down the road. So big thanks for you taking the time to come on the podcast. Again, everybody, you can check out Lima's coverage before and after Cavs games at Rock Entertainment Sports Network, simulcast on My Cleveland 43 and FanDuel Sports Network. Big thanks to you, Tony. Thank you so much for coming on. Always enjoy talking to you. Big thanks to everyone tuning in live on YouTube. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. Click that notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you're listening via podcast and you want to support us, leave us a rating, leave a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. If you want to be part of Chasedown's exclusive Discord chat, send a screenshot of their via to chasedownpod@gmail.com. However you choose to support us, we really do appreciate it. Be sure you guys are staying safe out there. Until next time, yo Cavs.